So these are the peas that I've planted. Peas like to start growing when it's still pretty cool. It's not like a hot summer yet. The nighttime still get really cool. And different seeds, just like different people, like different temperatures to wake up. We call that germinating. And peas like a nice cool temperature to germinate, that is, to wake up out of the ground and come out of their shells. So I've started some peas, and a few days ago, you can see there's a little bit of plastic sticking out here, and there's some straw. So this is the soil, and I've got plastic to keep the water and the soil in so it doesn't come out these cracks right here on the outside. I'm trying to keep as much soil and water as possible in here. And then this straw, once the seeds come up, I move the straw back around where the seeds are planted, so that the water stays in and the sun doesn't make it all evaporate. So here you can see one pea seed has come up. It's right here, and it's just a little green thing sticking out. You can see part of the husk of the seed there. That's a pea. Here's a few more. You see these green things. These, in a few days, are going to have leaves, and they're going to start climbing all the way up. All the way up. Up. Last year, I had peas that were 7 feet tall, which is taller than most men. So they really like it here, especially in the spring. And I will keep showing you how they grow. Hi there, boys and girls. I wanted to show you one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Frog and Toad Together. And you can see it's torn, it's taped on the side. Look at this. It's a disaster. Do you know why? It's because this is one of our favorite books. I read this book so much. Do you have a favorite book like this? Maybe it doesn't look new anymore, but you love it so much. Well, this is one of our families. And inside, it's a bit of a chapter book. And inside, it's got a couple of chapters. Oops, so you can see there's some crayon there. It's got a couple of chapters. And the story I'm going to read to you today is called The Garden. You can even see what page it's on. It's on page 18. So I'm going to read to you the story, The Garden. The book is Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. The Garden. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. "My seeds will not grow," said Toad. "You are shouting too much," said Frog. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow." "My seeds are afraid to grow?" asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow." That night,
Toad looked out of his window. "Drat," said Toad. "My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark." Toad went out to his garden with some candles. "I will read the seeds a story," said Toad. "Then they will not be afraid." Toad read a long story to his seeds. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. "What shall I do?" cried Toad. These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world." Then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. "Toad, Toad, wake up," said Frog. "Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. "At last!" shouted Toad. "But my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow." "And now you will have a nice garden too," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad. "But you were right, Frog. It was very hard work."
I hope you enjoyed The Garden in Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. And just so you know, Arnold Lobel has a whole bunch of books with different chapters, and I think that lots of you are ready to read these by yourself. So maybe you can find these books and start reading them yourselves with your parents. You know, in our family, we love Frog and Toad so much that we actually have Frog and Toad characters. And you can see closely right here, at one point, Toad lost an eye and my daughter sewed a button on. So now he's got two eyes again. I want you to think about the story, The Garden, and I want you to think about how Frog said it was going to be so much work to grow a garden. I want to think about whether or not it was a lot of work for Toad. Was it a lot of work for Toad? He did a lot of things, didn't he? He even read stories at nighttime. Do you think the seeds would have grown even if he didn't do those things? Let's think back to what we learned in science earlier in the year when we planted those seeds. What did they need? Did we have to play music for those seeds to grow? What were the things that they needed? I'm very curious to hear what you would have to say. And you could even do some writing about this if you wanted. If you're growing things at your house, growing food for your family in a container somewhere, or even in the ground, maybe you can notice what sorts of things you have to do to keep those plants growing strong and healthy. Do you have to read poems to them? Do you maybe tell stories to them? Or do you do other things to keep your plants really healthy? Do you remember those pea seeds I planted 2 weeks ago? I showed you those tiny little green things poking out of the ground. Let's go back out into my garden and see how those peas are doing. I'm back outside, and it's been about 2 weeks since we looked at those tiny, tiny little peas that I showed you that were poking up out of the soil like little tiny worms. And you can see I have some large plants coming up. Many of them have lots of leaves. And here you can see on this one, for example, you can see that it's got little, what we call tendrils. And these are the little wiggly pieces of the plant that are gonna grab onto here and climb, climb, climb all the way up to the top. And I wanted to show you that some of these are a little too close together. So one of the things that I do is I plant more peas than more peas than I need, more than can fit here and really grow healthy. So I'm gonna do something that gardeners do called thinning out my plants. So here I'm gonna use the tip of this, it's actually a tent peg. a big metal tent peg, and I'm going to use it because it's nice and tiny to get in here. And I'm going to be digging up some of these plants. And now the reason I'm doing that is not because there's anything wrong with the plant, but because I want to give its neighbors some more room. So I'm going to try to do this in a way where you can see what's going on here. I'm pulling it up really gently, and you can see there's the pea seed, and dig it a little bit more so you can see. I want you to see the, oopsie, I bothered its neighbors. They were sitting so nicely. So here's the pea seed, and then I'm gonna get right under there, and big long roots. Do you see those big long roots? And they've got some soil stuck to them. So I could move this and plant it somewhere else. I've been a little bit rough with it. It might not want to grow. I can move it, or I can just pull it out. The other thing I can do is eat it. Oops. Pea shoots are really tasty.